You and I have a rendezvous with destiny. We'll preserve for our children this, the last best hope of man on earth, or we'll sentence them to take the last step into 1,000 years of darkness.
We can deport violent, illegal criminals. That makes a lot of sense.
I continue to believe Mr. Trump will not be president.
Obama was not the president for this system.
Do you think that House Democrats and Senate Democrats should try to cooperate with Donald Trump
if he tries to kick people off their health insurance? We're going to have a Youngstown street fight.
The American people, they voted against Hillary. They voted against this administration.
We pledge allegiance to one flag, and that flag is the American flag.
Welcome to the Abolitionists Roundtable, your all-access pass to the 2017 Red, White, and Blue Conservative Revolution. Join the conversation at 734-822-1600. Now, here are your hosts, Del Marsh, Phil Stargell, and Janice Daniels.
And good morning. This is Phil Stargell. This is Art of Michigan. We are on the air. We have a show for you today. I am sure that you may want to have a few minutes to call your relatives, your friends, and let them know we have a barn burner this morning that we're going to speak about. First of all, I want to welcome to the studio this morning our panel here, and that is starting off with the mayor, America's mayor, Mayor Janice Daniels. Good morning, Mayor.
Thank you, Phil. Good morning to you, too.
And then, of course, on the left.
Oh, it's supposed to be opposite of right. We never use left.
Is Del Marsh, of course.
You could say left. Del. You could say left, right, center. I already know where I'm
you're secure with that, right?
And I'm rooted in fighting and defeating liberalism.
Well, we are going to have this morning. We're going to have on the show Phil Haney, and it is an acquaintance of the mayor. So the mayor is going to take the lead on this interview. We're going to get right to it, but there's a couple of things I want to make out.
Yeah.
First of all, Adele, talk a little bit about the CPAC, because if you remember our first show of Art. Mm-hmm. I was down in Washington, D.C. when the goons down there locked up. Well, they surrounded the building, and we couldn't come out of the building. And we had a fear that somebody could do something like, maybe set a fire somewhere. And we were in this building and couldn't get out.
And at that time, we didn't know that these were paid leftist protesters. Now,
exactly
all this
right.
information I outfeel, these are paid leftist protesters.
Yeah.
These paid leftist protesters from the what group did I call it? From from Project Veritas.
Yes.
Project Veritas is the group that went to during the election process and went out and infiltrated Trump's rallies. They put on T-shirts. Go ahead, Mayor.
Actually, it wasn't Project Veritas. Project Veritas was the group that revealed them. That was Americans Take Action.
That's it. Americans Take Action. Yeah. And that group went out and caused all this ruckus, and people actually thought that it was Trump's people that were starting fights, starting rallies. Had waving the Confederate flags. It was a Confederate flag with Trump name on it. These are all leftist activists. Mm-hmm. They were paid. They were paid leftists.
And what it is doing, it is scaring these weak-kneed Republican
and it's intimidating them.
Yeah, and
actually, it's worse than intimidating the Republicans. It's really aimed at intimidating voters, and so it was a lot of people went to the polls in private, concealing the truth that they were going to who they were going to vote for. They wasn't telling posters, they wasn't telling people over the phone. But let me just get into it real quick. But what happened last night is that these liberals, they planted pictures of Trump on a Russian flag inside CPAC last night, and luckily CPAC got a note to it real quick and went around and got those out. Before fake, we still got some pictures where fake news, of course, fake news still, they got clips of it before they could get it out.
Well, I would like to say something. All of this is about trying to tie Trump to something that he's being controlled by the Soviet Union or Russia now. And you and I know that of all of the things and all of the dirty names that they've called Republicans and especially conservative, they never called them communists.
No.
They never called them communists because they are the socialist communists in this country, and they did not want to get the Russians. I mean, the Democrats kept the Soviet Union viable, a world superpower, because of their treatment of the Soviet Union. It's one of the reasons why I dislike the Democrats so much, because they say anything and everything, and the worst form of government ever invented, communism, they had nothing but glorious things to say about them. Not only the Russians, but Fidel Castro, the Sandinistas, every bunch of despots that they could find, they supported them.
They had a love affair with them.
And so now what's going on? They tell us that Russia manipulated our elections. The people that are manipulating our elections are below the border.
Right.
The Mexicans, they are the ones pouring people, not only Mexicans, but all down through South America. They're letting them pour into our country. And we sit there and talk about, well, if we don't get the Hispanic vote, we are never going to win another election. This proves it, and this proves that these weak-kneed Republicans need to get some spine and get some backbone and tell these people we're not going to tolerate this nonsense anymore. That's my little two cents.
No, go ahead, Phil. Go ahead. Yep. No. You were right on point with that right there. These are the academic Republicans. These are the speechwriter Republicans. These are the Republicans that go on TV and what right here is the grassroots of it. We gotta. It's up to us to explain conservatism again, and get out there and really implement conservatism and defend conservatism.
And quit this nonsense.
This is the best. Conservatism is what's going to lift people out of poverty and lift them out of these. But it's liberals that tried to create this despot group of all kind of people, from these homosexuals to all these illegals. They tried to create this
how the Democrats, Jimmy Peanuts Carter, legitimized North Korea, and now we got a serious problem.
Right.
And that's because of the fact that they keep telling us, and they're telling us the same thing about the real problem we face, which the next guest is going to, we're going to get to that in there. But I want to just say that it's the same attitude and the same general way that they have done with the Soviet Union and all these other communist dictators.
Yeah.
They're doing it right now with the radical Islamists. So.
Well, go ahead. You wanted to do a soundbite, right?
Yeah.
Y'all go ahead and lead in. We got a little sidetracked there for a minute. Go ahead.
Just a minute.
Well, we wanted to do a small clip from the CPAC convention with Steve Bannon, telling us exactly where we stand today. Derek, if you could.
President Trump really laid this out, as Ryan said, many years ago at CPAC. It's really CPAC that really originally gave him the springboard. It's the first time at Breitbart we started seeing him and saw how people, his speeches resonated with people. And then he would go out to these smaller town halls later, and really he got traction with the same message he's bringing.
Wrong one?
Yep, Derek, that wasn't exactly what I was hoping to play. I wanted to play the clip where Steve Bannon says, we've got a fight on our hands, and if you think that they're going to give back our country to us without a fight, you're sadly mistaken.
Okay. Well, if you can get that together, Derek, what was that the first part of it?
Well, why don't we do this?
Go ahead. Okay.
Derek?
You got it?
Would you? You got it?
All right, Derek's going to play it now.
Okay.
All the opportunities he had to waver off this, all the people have come to him and said, oh, you got to moderate. Every day in the Oval Office, he tells Reince and I committed this to the American people. I promised this when I ran, and I'm going to deliver on this.
No, that's not the right clip either. Well, let's just move forward. We're going to be interviewing a gentleman named Phil Haney. I think many of you have heard of Phil Haney. He's the former DHS founding member. Yes. He actually set up the structure for the Department of Homeland Security, and then became a whistleblower because he realized that the mission was compromised by, I think, the Obama administration for one, and so he wrote a book called "If You See Something, Say Nothing," which is kind of an ironic but realistic twist on the national campaign by the DHS to raise public awareness, supposedly, of terrorism, known as "If You See Something, Say Something." And so we think maybe the DHS has either lost its mission or it's become quite nefarious from the go. Mr. Haney, are you on the line with us?
Yeah, I sure am. Glad to be here. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Thank you so much for joining the Abolitionist Roundtable. We appreciate it. Mr. Haney has been given a great gift of perception and analysis, and he has an ability to present the information to the people so that we can understand what it is that we're facing. And I think that we have to look at this issue of national security with a real clear eye on what the bottom line is, and Mr. Haney is going to give us some of his perceptions on what that bottom line is. Mr. Haney, I think that it might be a good idea for us to start with your two-prong analysis of why Lieutenant General Mike Flynn was fired in less than 30 days after being appointed as the National Security Advisor to President Trump.
Well, we discussed this earlier, that there are actually two aspects to what happened that are going on simultaneously. The is in the long run going to be more important to focus on, and that is that, and as President Trump himself said in tweet and in public, how did this information get leaked?
Yeah.
That is actually the most important issue, because whether, when it's all said and done, we discover exactly what did happen between Vice President Pence and General Flynn, that, if we find that out, that'd be fine. But the real important question is, how did all this information get leaked? You're talking transcripts of telephone calls, personal conversations, and those kind of things. And you've been noticing lately that President Trump is raising this question over and over. Stop the leaks. By the way, when he tweeted that message out to FBI, I think it was yesterday or so, that stop the leaks, you realize that he's sending a direct message to FBI Director James Comey. He's telling James Comey, do your job. We're not talking about Democrat, Republican, Independent, red or green or whatever color. We're talking about do your basic job and contain the information that you have been given the responsibility to contain.
But Mr. Haney, oh, yeah, that's exactly what I wanted you to do, was to go to your second part of the analysis.
Part two seems to turn around the conversation that General Flynn and Vice President Pence had. Of course, we weren't there, but what I learned from it, judging on the nature of the character of President and Vice President and his upper staff, they're signaling that they have a very high standard of integrity and honesty. It's not whether they agree with you or if you make a mistake, those kind of things. It's that they expect us, to be honest. I mean, President Trump is reflecting that in his attitude toward the media, calling them dishonest and fake news and enemies of the people. So you would have to expect that his upper staff, the people that he worked with, regardless of what their opinion is or if he agrees with it, will be honest with him. And apparently that's what happened. There was a calculation made, I'll say, on General Flynn's side in terms of how he communicated what he said to the people in Russia that he talked to, that was less than honest, apparently. Because I don't see President Trump letting him go just over the policy issue, because President Trump expects his people to reach out and talk. But in this case, it wasn't what Mike Flynn did in terms of his phone calls and conversations. It's what he didn't do when he communicated with Vice President Pence. I was in the government,
right,
and I was a founding member of the Department of Homeland Security. From the day you take the oath through the academy and every day thereafter, there's one basic fundamental rule that we're all told. do not lie. Do not always be honest. No matter how afraid you might be of what the truth is, it's always better to be honest about what happened than it is to try to create a story about it. So, again, I wasn't there, but my reading of it, based on the personalities of the people involved from President Trump on down, is that he has a very high standard for communication, being honest and having integrity. And I believe that essentially he had to do it, simply to set a standard so that everybody else that's going to be on the team going forward will know, tell the truth, be honest, and be straightforward and have integrity. That's how I read it.
Yeah, and that's a good way to look at it, because he's setting a high standard for everyone, and that's great. And on the happy side of things, there's a great big long list of people who are leaving the administration. We've got Craig Deere from the National Security Council. He's leaving. Joseph Clancy, U.S. Secret Service Director, he's leaving. I understand there's a great shakeup at the State Department with Secretary Tillerson basically eliminating a number of people in the positions closest to him. Mr. Haney, can you speak on all of these good aspects of these people that are leaving the administration?
Yes, I certainly can, because I was active duty intelligence officer inside the Department of Homeland Security, and I saw this kind of thing going on every single day. The policies that were created within the Department of Homeland Security had to do with two basic arenas that we're facing today, in the immigration arena and in the counterterrorism arena. And now we see that those are the two greatest threats that we're facing today, isn't it?
Yeah, indeed.
Chaos in the immigration system, and also chaos in the counterterrorism arena. Those are law enforcement arenas, and the administration and secretaries like Janet Napolitano and Jay Johnson wrote directives and findings and memos and policies that they passed down the chain of command that basically told us, literally, you do what we tell you or you will suffer the consequences. And then the response from the people on the ground was, well, we take a vow to protect our country from threat, both foreign and domestic. Do what we told you, otherwise you will face the consequences. And so for someone like me to see these upper-level people leaving, I'm not shedding a tear, simply because I know that the policies that were engendered from the highest levels of the executive branch, meaning the White House, were passed down the chain of command through any number of people who simply could have had the courage to stand up and say, Mr. President, Mr. Secretary, your immediate first-line supervisor, whoever, this isn't right. This is a violation of this, that, or the other provision or statute or law. And we need to, this is our job, this is our vow we took. You can't really expect the officer in the field who took a vow to follow this order. And apparently, virtually no one did that. And that's why stories like mine are becoming more and more powerful now that the election has taken place, because what I write about in the book is still going on now.
Yeah, from the grassroots level, it certainly is a questionable concept as to why there aren't more whistleblowers when the men and women that are in these departments of high-level security ought to have that mission of protecting our Constitution and our rights to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And yet, as you say, you are like you're the exception rather than the rule, and that's very scary from a grassroots perspective.
Well, it's scary from a active duty officer perspective too.
Yeah.
Because what do you do when you work for people like this?
Yeah.
What do you do when you see secretaries of Homeland Securities and attorney generals of Department of Justice and people in the DOD and the FBI openly lying to members of Congress in public testimony? How do I know that? Because I worked at the intelligence office of the Department of Homeland Security. I had a gift for this kind of work.
Right.
And I worked on cases that were discussed in public.
It's amazing.
And I knew that just like any of us know within our area of specialty, you know if it's right or mostly right, and you know if it's wrong. Mm-hmm. It's not that difficult for you, just like radio. I couldn't come in and run the board at the radio. I couldn't be the producer of your show. I could learn it, but you would certainly know real quick that I didn't know what I was doing, wouldn't you? And it's the same in any profession. So when I saw my appointed or elected officials disinforming, deliberately misleading the American public, that pushed me into a really difficult moral crisis. Now what am I going to do?
Yeah, right. Mr. Haney, I was a little bit concerned when the present Department of Homeland Security Secretary John Kelly was in Guatemala this past week and said that there would not be a mass roundup to deport migrants. Now, seems to me that there's a mass exodus into our country of illegal migrants. So why wouldn't there be a mass deportation system in place? He said something like he's going to put them through the U.S. court systems, which to my mind means that we're going to burden an already burdened bureaucratic system.
Well, there's three things going on there that I took away. The first one is he also told them, don't even bother coming. Don't waste your money because you're not going to get in anymore. Mm-hmm. So that sends a strong message, not just to the people in Guatemala, of course, which is the reason why he did it, and that's why he said it there on the ground in the country of Guatemala. But he also said that it may well be that they go through the court system, quote unquote, but they're going to be implementing and expediting these processes like nothing we have seen since really the time that the Department of Homeland Security was first organized in March of 2003, because what we see, what is being reported in the protesting in the streets, etc., with signs and disruption, is actually so far away from where we used to be, I call it the center, that now enforcing the law seems radical and cruel and discriminatory and biased and racist. But all that President Trump is trying to do with the rest of the people in the law enforcement arena that he's appointing is take us back to the beginning, to the place where we used to be or had been for quite some time. And this is the key word, friends. We hear a lot about executive orders, right? Mm-hmm. And we're hearing about directives and policies that are signed by Secretary Kelly. And it's like a blizzard. There's all kinds of them. But there's one very, very important distinction to make between the executive orders and directives that are being brought forward now and the ones that were brought forward in the Obama administration, even though the names sound the same, executive order. The distinction is that they're built around implementation. The executive orders that President Trump is designating now are built around implementation of existing law.
That's exactly what they were to begin with when George Washington wrote a couple of executive orders, was, like you say, to develop the implementation of existing law, not to make new law.
No, and that's what Obama administration did that was so different. It wasn't about implementation. It was about unilateral policy change.
Right.
See, and that's a huge difference. You can have 20 executive orders. Oh, well, they both made the same number of executive orders. Yes, numerically, they are the same. Let's just for the sake of the argument. But the nature of them is entirely different. And all of those executive orders that were passed down through the chain of command with the Department of Homeland Security, where I worked, were all rescinded in one day on the 20th of February in the implementation of immigration reform directive that he signed on the 20th of February.
Mr. Haney, I hope you can stay with us. I want to, after the break, talk to you about an important article where you were quoted called Islamic Terror Cells Shift from Mideast to U.S.-Mexican Border. That's out of the Counter Jihad Report. Stay with us. After these messages, we'll be right back.
From the mighty mountains of New York, let freedom ring from the heights of Alabama.
You're listening to the Abolitionists Roundtable, patriotic, red, white, and blue, conservative all-access radio, with your hosts, Del, Phil, and Janice. They're leading the charge and advancing the conservative revolution. Join the conversation at 734-822-1600.
Hello, I'm Milt, and this is Logically Speaking Uncensored, the evil power of left-wing liberal tribalism. If you try to analyze or evaluate the activities and subversive upheavals being committed across the nation by left-wing liberals, you will fail unless you understand that the master control that governs their deeds is tribalism. Tribalism, which comes from the word tribe, is defined as the beliefs, culture, and organization of people with common interests. Being a member of a tribe in and of itself is not a problem. However, the ideology of the tribe determines if it is negative or positive. Therefore, any tribe whose beliefs are predicated on the perpetuation of lies, biases, bigotry, and unjustified hatred is a negative tribe, and so will be their tribalism. The Democrat Party has been and still is a negative tribe, whose politics dictate acceptance without regrets or shame of anarchists, insurrectionists, outlaws, and avid anti-American militants into their domain. Left-wing liberals' influence within the Democrat Party is the catalyst for programs that corrupt the intellectual sovereignty of individuals and groups and give them a mindset of civil disobedience. Left-wing liberals are secular humanists, merchants of misery, who sanction the use of derogatory and incendiary language that assassinates the character of non-tribe members as they inflict unspeakable pain upon the society of legal Americans. Left-wing liberals and Democrats are fond of calling conservatives and Republicans racists, fascists, and Nazis, but they never call them communists because they reserve that name for themselves. Left-wing liberals share a commonality with Democrats, communists, and Muslims in that they work collectively to divide the United States into separate enclaves that weaken the strength of incorporated unity. That is why killing Christians and Jews by Muslims is considered collateral casualties in their war against God and the United States. Tribalists demand devout loyalty to the revolution of obstruction and resistance. That is why during the inauguration of President Trump, they found no fault with rioters in Washington, D.C. or rioters in Berkeley, California. Daily, left-wing liberal tribalists who are bought and paid for by hate American traitors hypocritically use the pretext of civil and human rights, diversity, and equality to conceal their deplorable deeds. And the most reprehensible deed of left-wing liberals is their dismissal of one's character by using pigmentation tribalism as a weapon to segregate and mislead people into believing the self-loathing myth of never-ending racism. Therefore, we the people, for our security and survival, must not ignore the evil power of left-wing liberal tribalism. I am Milt, Logically Speaking Uncensored, saying, think about it.
And we are back, and Mr. Haney, I'd like to put someone up with a comment that he wants to make real quick. It's Gary from Hazel Park. Gary, would you be real brief and make your comment?
Yeah, good morning. Mr. Haney, I really liked your statement that you said that the executive orders, 20 of them, it's the difference between a shepherd's pie and a blueberry pie. I mean, they might be called a pie, but they're totally different things, and you're absolutely accurate.
Okay, thank you, Gary. We appreciate that. I wanted to get back. Phil, did you have something you wanted to ask Mr. Haney?
Quick question, Mr. Haney. The purpose of the Homeland Security is to protect the homeland from terrorism on our soil. Am I correct?
Yes, our original founding mandate, when the agency was created in March of 2003, coming up on the 14th birthday, I'll read it to you. The original Homeland Security was founded, dedicated to preventing terrorist attacks within the United States, reducing America's vulnerability to terrorism, and minimizing the damage from potential attacks and natural disasters. That was it.
Yeah.
That's why DHS was created. May I say something about the clip that you just played about tribes and tribalism?
Mm-hmm.
Please.
How do you know when you're part of a tribe? And how do you know when you're not part of a tribe? It's a really amazing thing. It's called the border.
Yes.
Good point.
You don't know whether you're in a tribe or not. If you look at it from the Middle East perspective, for example, in Iraq, there are 72 different ethnic groups that speak 4 major languages scattered over the face of the map of Iraq. How do they know when they're in one territory or the next? And for them it's important because you can lose your life if you cross into the wrong territory, is by boundaries.
Yes.
And what is a safe space, by the way?
Boundaries.
Safe space.
Yeah.
It's a boundary.
Yeah.
And how do you know whether you're in a sanctuary city or not?
Well, must
because
be
they
boundaries.
have a boundary.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes. So isn't it amazing that the progressive leftists who scream and holler about no walls, no boundaries, are actually fiercely protective of their own particular boundaries, and that if you cross them like an illegal alien, you will get deported faster than you can blink. They're very, very serious about enforcing their own form of a boundary. It's just different than a national boundary.
Yeah, and we seem to be very lax on enforcing our boundaries, and that seems to be, they want to take it up a notch. And it's the same thing with laws. They do not want to follow the law. The mandate for Homeland Security would almost demand that we tighten up our borders and take them seriously if we want to protect the people in this country, which is the #1 job of every government official.
Right.
And
well, a country without a border is not a country.
That's right. Exactly right. And so when on your book, it says these are some of the things that that your book tells people. It tells people how the Bush administration stripped him and other frontline officers of their ability to define the threat. It also says that the Obama administration knew in advance of Boston Marathon bombing and how it launched an ongoing cover-up on behalf of a major ally. These things would, I noticed that in your speech with Michelle Bachmann sitting at your left, you recited your oath of office, which you did this morning. You also made reference to your oath of office. How could the oath of office of all of these government officials be in line with what their duties are when these things that you enumerate in your book are against all of those, the oath of office and even our Constitution? So
well, it's really another example of a kind of a border. If you're a law enforcement officer and you raise your hand and take a vow to protect your country from threat, both foreign and domestic, then you have just taken a vow to protect the border, the integrity border, the professionalism border, and that's what we kind of were talking about earlier. Can you imagine what it must have been like, or actually is like in some respects, to work among people who supposedly took that vow but when it actually comes down to it, they look the other way.
Yeah.
And to see this from the top down, that's what's really amazing. Not the bottom up, but from the top down.
And the last question I have for you is, in your book, you also said that it is not jihadism, it is Sharia law. And the most chilling statement that I've ever heard is when the guy that is a security officer in the Homeland Security made the statement that America's Constitution is the most Sharia compliant document in the world. That was a guy named Al-Libiari. Are you familiar with him?
Yeah, Mohammed Al-Libiari.
Yeah.
He was on the advisory board for Janet Napolitano, helping set policy, and it turned out that he was undermining our Constitution by trying to access classified information to build a case that his own government, the one that entrusted him with the position of authority, was racist and Islamophobic.
Oh my God. Is he still in
his position?
Is he still a security handling security?
No, he's not. Okay, he's not involved in the government any longer.
Because I believe it also says on your book that the purging of training material that casts Islam in a negative light. In other words, anything against the things of Islam were purged out if you expose that, which is why it was obvious they had to try to get you out of a position where you were exposed, because you did a real good job, as I can see.
Well, there's 3 levels or 3 sequences of response that the government did. The first is passive. They tried to ignore the information that was in the system. So just when you don't do anything about a problem, that's a passive response. But that didn't work because our information was too accurate. It was very effective. So they had to go to the next level, which is a deliberate, intentional decision to remove the information. That's a much higher level of involvement and accountability if you do that, if you literally remove the information. And they did that as well. But that wasn't enough to stop people like myself, so they had to go to the third level, which is to go after the actual subject matter experts who put the information in the system in the first place. And that's exactly what they did.
Mr. Haney, I got another caller here that would like to ask you a quick question. And this is Gary from Shelby Township. Go ahead, Gary.
Yes, hi, Mr. Haney. I'd like to ask you, Senator Cruz has a Senate bill to designate the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organization. I don't have much faith in Congress, so do you think President Trump will sign an executive order to designate the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organization, and what would that do to CARE as far as their offices throughout the United States?
It would be decimating to organizations like CARE because they are irrefutably tied to Hamas. They're part of the Muslim Brotherhood. It's been known for at least 10 years that that was the case. And along with CARE would be Islamic Society of North America, North American Islamic Trust, and the Assembly of Muslim Jurists of America, which openly promotes Sharia law. Am I confident? I'm still hopeful that it will be passed. Even this week, I found 2 or 3 very major, well-written articles about background discussions about going forward with the designation as the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist group. But there's one other way that President Trump could address this that would be almost as effective, and that is to redefine what is now called Countering Violent Extremism, the CVE program that disconnects Islam from terrorism.
That's right.
And actually call it something like Countering Islamic Extremism, which President Trump has said in public. If you were to do that, it may not be quite the same as designating the Muslim Brotherhood, but on the other hand, it would still have, imagine if the federal government came to Detroit and shut down Daoud Walid's office, what would happen? It would be a signal to the entire world, wouldn't it? Starting with America, but echoing, and we could do it without firing a shot or dropping a single bomb anywhere. And yet, of course, we're constantly told that we don't have a right to do that, somehow that we're racist and Islamophobic if we simply take steps to shut down an organization that already has proven ties to Hamas.
Well, that's why, Mr. Haney, I have a little bit of a concern that President Trump is focusing on destroying ISIS, because ISIS is a group, but the Muslim Brotherhood is an organization, and they have infiltrated the United States at the highest levels. I want to get back to your article, or where you're quoted in this article, Islamic terror cells shift from Mideast to U.S.-Mexican border, because what this article is suggesting, and this was written in January of 2017, so just last month, the Muslim Brotherhood and their organizations and their networks are only waiting for the order to attack American cities. Mr. Haney, can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, first I want to say that it's not just ISIS. And that's one of the things that we need to redefine.
That's what I'm saying,
There's a lot of spin-off groups.
A lot of what?
I would say it's a lot of spin-off groups, but with the same kind of mission.
Well, see, it's important to understand that there's a difference between the strategy and the tactics. The strategy is the same for all the groups that are operating in the world today: Boko Haram, Hezbollah, Hamas, ISIS, you name it. Their strategy is the same. What's different, which, by the way, their strategy is what you referred to earlier, implementation of Sharia law. See, they have executive orders also, and they want to implement law also. And that is the strategy of every operating group in the world today. It's very simple. Implementation of Sharia law. What is complicated and kaleidoscopic is the tactics. How do they go about it? Do they use open violence like ISIS and Hamas? Or do they use subtle infiltration like Hamas? And so that's the argument among the different groups around the world, not what their goal is, but how to go about accomplishing it. And with the Muslim Brotherhood in America and North America, Canada and the United States, their approach is to go through the three main arenas of our culture, which is social, political, and law enforcement. And if you look around at the influence of groups like CAIR, you suddenly realize that they have saturated themselves into the social arena, the political arena, and the law enforcement arena. And so, yes, they're successfully accomplishing, step by step, what they plainly stated their intention was.
Well, they have
so to shut down these groups is going to have consequences throughout the social arena, the political arena, and the law enforcement arena that we can't even hardly imagine right now.
Right, and the forces that are combining together to accomplish this goal, which is called the Red-Green Alliance, which is cultural Marxist, or the leftists in this country, that are joining forces with the radical Islamists. And Black Lives Matter is coming in unity with the radical Islamists. So there so many different fronts, like you say, Mr. Haney, are joining together to make this a very difficult fight.
And
well, the amazing thing about it is that their purpose is right in the Declaration of Independence. And that is that they're seeking to alter or abolish the current form of government.
Isn't that the truth? And they took a major step forward this past Tuesday in Sterling Heights, a city that is northeast of us here in Ann Arbor, where the city council first allocated $1 million for playground equipment. And then they identified the lack of funds as a reason why they couldn't fight a political ideology that is chanting death to America. And now, because the city council caved to CAIR, Duad, what's his name, Duad Wali or something like that. Yeah. Because they caved to them, they now have to not only have a mega mosque, another mega mosque built in a Chaldean Christian residential neighborhood. They also have to go to sensitivity training.
And what was the first thing that Daoud Walid said when the court and the city council's decision? He boasted. He said, "You will never attack us again. We're going to prevail over you." That is supremacy in modern English American language.
Yes.
He didn't say, "Thank you."
Yeah.
Did he?
No.
He didn't say, "We're going to pledge to work with the community that this new mosque will be built in." He said, "You don't dare try to stop us because we will win." And these kind of statements have to be looked at carefully because words, as it says in the Bible, the power of death and life are in words.
And the power of the
and
tongue.
you really
right?
do have to listen to them, what they say carefully.
Right. In fact, one of these leaders, Khaliha Sabra, said, "We're a community that staged a revolution." This is just speaking of the Muslim Brotherhood who created the Arab Spring Revolution. And she says, "We're a community that staged a revolution across the world. If we can do that, why can't we have that revolution in America?" And so that's why, again, I want to go back to that border, these groups that are amassing at our border, just waiting for the order to come over here. Mr. Haney, how serious is President Trump about protecting our borders?
Well, the U.S. Southern Command published statistics about 3 months ago that 31,000 individuals from what we call special interest countries, that is the countries like were named in this executive order that got so much attention. Special interest countries, 31,000 of them crossed over the southern border in the year 2015. That's 10% of the 330,000 total people that crossed over the southern border. So going back to this whole concept of borders and what is our strongest protection? Is it a wall? I would say no.
No.
It's the Constitution.
It is.
Yeah.
We have to understand what the Constitution actually is and look at that as our first and foremost border protection right there. And then that's your strategy, see. The strategy is follow the Constitution.
Amen.
Tactical, how do you implement that? What do you have to do in order to ensure the safety of the American people with the Constitution? That is, follow through on immigration law.
Mr. Haney, Mr. Haney, we have to break. We've got about one more minute, so we want to definitely thank you for joining us, and we want to promote your book again. If you see something, say nothing, and it's a very important read. I like to quote Ann Cochran, who says that if we don't get this issue right, if we don't get this issue of refugee resettlement and national security right, there won't be any.
Are you still there?
Yeah,
Yes.
We're still here. If we don't get this issue,
I pulled over. I had a highway patrolman come up on me.
Uh-oh.
Reason why you stopped on the interstate?
All right, well,
I'm on a
thank
radio
you.
interview, and I didn't want to drive and have the noise.
You stopped here. It's 2 days.
All right, we're listening to your conversation with the police officer, so this is live radio. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Haney.
All right.
So I hope you don't get a ticket, because we are pro-law enforcement in this station.
What state is he in?
So
Georgia.
In Georgia. Okay.
Folks, that name of that book again is "See Something, Say Nothing," and that's in reference to the policy that was supposed to be "See Something, Say Something," and they did absolutely the opposite of what the policy was.
That's right.
So, folks, we are going to be back next week with another hard-hitting interview. So join us, and Del, got anything you want?
See you next week, folks.
Okay.
God bless America.
Garden City, Michigan, 48135.
Or follow Phil, Del, and Janice at artofmichigan.com. You can also send emails to artofmichigan@hotmail.com. And most of all, continue to listen every Saturday and tell a friend.